Welcome to Innersight, Health Optimization with Rudy and Shaun.
Right, Shaun, here we go. Podcast number 32.
And welcome to 2026 for the two of us. This is our first recording this year.
Yeah, so January, we thought for our listeners out there, we bring it back to just ourselves, and we really want to bring it to the clients themselves so they can understand how we think in layman terms. So we are going to talk about quite a few things, and people probably have had, and maybe some still do, a bit of New Year resolutions. And then they focus on one thing, and we realize people focus on one thing, but they don't really have a roadmap. And we've actually developed one.
Absolutely. I think part of the problem with New Year resolutions is a lot of people struggle with exactly that. What to do, what to choose, what's the first thing that I need to do. So we have developed the web app for our clientele, which is basically like a health wallet. We do our calculations in this app. We store their information, but they can track themselves over time, and we can put certain time limits and time frames on what they need to do and just plot it out for them. So we're very excited about that.
Yeah, we are very excited, and we both have our own health wallet on there. And I think that's what people should understand. It's a continuum of how you live. So there's lots of values that go in there, and they have to be tracked. And you're going to miss some of them. You're going to hit some of them. And as I always say to someone sitting across the table or next to me when we have a conversation about their health, everyone has got something. So everyone has to focus on a little bit different things. And we are going to take the most important markers, we think, today and just chat about them and say, okay, but what is a ApoB? What is a ferritin? Where does iron fit? So that everything that we've done so far, that we get a little bit of an idea, and just start tracking. And maybe you should just tell us the broad picture. So we have cardiac, we have family history, and
Yeah, so when we see someone, it's quite an intense process because we do questionnaires for family history, as you said, but to calculate cardiac risk, we do the ANAM score for hormonal stuff, and this questionnaire after questionnaire, it saves us time in the sense that we don't need to sit down with the patient and do it, and we get it nice on the app. It's in a nice, beautiful picture laid out, and we can use that calculations to talk to people. Then we also have a clinic visit where we test fitness and health metrics, and we do in-body scans, and then we add all the blood tests to that. So we got a big picture. Once you sit in front of me, I know you. On paper, I can see what's going on even before we started to talk about your health. The problem is often you'll see someone say, "Oh, but they want to test some of the metrics," and then it becomes difficult because I'm always, what do you leave out? Where do you start? Things like that. So we'll talk about some of the most important ones that we think you at least should know. But I also think that people should change their mind on how they think about health. We service our cars every year or every set kilometers or mileage. At some point, you service your car and you don't think twice about it. That's what you do. You don't wait for the brakes to fail before you service your car. But in healthcare, we always wait until something happens or you start to worry about something before you actually spend some money on your health. And we need to change that. We need to put some effort in, and we need to, unfortunately, spend some money on our health to prevent stuff that might happen in the future.
And I think that part is actually the most satisfying that's happened to us now. I always say to people, you've got an 18-month cycle in my head to sort out your red lights that you actually have. But then we can look and how do we make you better? And these days, when people come to us, they say, but we've seen that person move so much and they are so much better. What are they doing? Help me, which is amazing.
No, absolutely. And initially, we thought, okay, we might sort things out in 6 months' time, maybe 12 months, but the reality is it takes about 18 months. After about 18 months, you start to move the needle. And it's little steps at a time, and it all builds up to this picture of where you're in good health.
So we started in our first podcast. We said we are both in the same journey. Both of us are now in our sixth decade on this earth, and we both have got medical issues. And I want to ask you, maybe just before we go and look at values, what surprised you? What is the one thing that maybe surprised you in this health checks that we do in the last year?
Um, Actually, the fact that we always find something. Um, I don't think there's one person that went through the program where we didn't find something. It might be something small, but everyone has got something. And sometimes that something might become a big problem later in life. But if we manage it now, it you prevent things from happening. But you can only do that if you actually test. If you actually sit down and go through all the systems and test.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing we do very thoroughly is I mean, we have to be cognizant of the fact that most tests cost money because they have to go to the lab, but on the other side, we don't spare anything that should not be there. We put everything that what we think is important in that profile. So I think if I can say for myself, iron still stumps me all the time that it's absolutely so common. I mean, both sides of iron. So for the men, we always have to look at the high iron, but an iron deficiency in children and women, it is rife. I almost want to say half of people in the Western Cape have got an iron deficiency in the young children and females. It is really rife. So
Yeah, and the funny thing is how many women think that's their normal.
they cope.
They cope.
Yeah.
But once you've treated them, they actually feel for the first time the way they should
Yeah.
feel.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to our web app. So we open up the web app so clients get a view so they can see themselves and we get a view which looks very much the same. And we park the piece now of the questionnaires for now, so that'll come first, and then we'll see a piece of the family history and obviously the medication list and all that we will go through. But then we test things, and maybe we should grab the first test that people should think about. What would you say?
So, despite all the knowledge and certainty around cardiovascular disease, it's still the number one cause of deaths worldwide. Okay. And we almost at a point where we can say it's not necessary to be that way. It's a preventable disease in most people, not all people, but most people.
Yeah,
And
so that's heart attacks and strokes pretty much.
yes,
Mm.
but still, we don't have control over that at the moment worldwide. So we do look at your lipid profile, but there's one value that we really look at, and that's the ApoB. But to explain to people what an ApoB is, we need to step back a little bit, because the normal question is, my cholesterol is 4. Am I okay? And then we don't know. I mean, what does it mean? Cholesterol of 4. We don't have an idea what's going on in your body with having one single value like that. So cholesterol is very important for the human. We make hormones from it. It's in our cell membranes. So the body needs to transport that cholesterol to different places. And it's a fatty substance. So to transport it, the body actually encapsulates it in something that we call a lipoprotein. I guess. And that's a little vehicle to make it more soluble and blood to take it to where it needs to be. So the lipoproteins, and people might have heard of this, is like the LDLs or the HDLs, things like that. So On these little lipoproteins, we've got the little protein molecule called ApoB. So that's the ApoB that we're referring to. So we know that we test cholesterol concentration, but we need to know the actual particle number, because we know the more particles you have, the more likely is that you might develop disease. And the way to determine that is by testing your ApoB. And I think I always take this example is if you've got a little, say a 2-liter Coke bottle, and you've got two next to each other. They're empty, okay, but they will take the same amount of cholesterol if we put it that. So you've got two people, patient A, patient B, and both of them, their cholesterol is 4. But you can pack the cholesterol in the lipoproteins in this bottle in, say, 100 small little marble-size balls. And in the other bottle, you can put the same amount of cholesterol in more larger tennis ball-size balls into the bottle. Each of these balls has got a little ApoB. Okay, so if we measure the ApoB, if you've got a high ApoB, then you know you've got the small little marble-sized balls, if it's a high value, because each of them has got a ApoB. If you've got a low ApoB, then it means that you've got the larger molecules. And we know the more of these molecules you have, the greater the chance that you might have a problem, because they're smaller and it's easier to enter into the artery wall and get stuck there and cause problems. So having an ApoB value, we know if you've got the problem cholesterol carrying molecules.
And I mean, if you read the literature, which we do daily, I mean, we send each other the stuff daily as it updates, and it is so clear that it is causal. So we need to know your ApoB. So, and for that, we haven't moved far enough. Our clients walk in and say, no, but I had a finger prick test and my cholesterol is okay. So what we are actually saying here to the layman is a finger prick cholesterol does not measure your ApoB. It normally gives you a type of value, but if someone cleaned your finger with alcohol before, you need a blood drawn from your arm or from somewhere, a venous sample, to get an ApoB value. So, and that is something we normally treat. So we both treat ours, but it is not an absolute necessity to treat, because we can have more values to see if your pipes are being blocked. So, but it is a very good indicator which way it's going. And we never let it go for us, even if your pipes are blocked. So we do a CT scan for our clients to say what is their calcium score, or a CT angio, but we never let it go. Even if it's 0, we say, okay, but we need to check again. We need to check again, because we cannot let that go. And I think another thing that surprised us is it gets worse. If we do nothing with age, it gets worse. I mean, our clients' lipograms change.
Yes, and it's so important to understand that your cardiac incident, your heart attack, your stroke, your TIA, that started 10, 20 years earlier. And it's unlikely that any medical insurance or most doctors will do anything to your values if you're young. But that's actually the time that we should intervene, because you need about 10, 20 years to make a difference. And that's what makes it difficult. Obviously, we don't use only the ApoB value. We put it in context with cardiac risk factors, family history, other markers, and we'll talk about another lipoprotein just now, to decide how aggressive we need to be on this value. But I think at the end of the day, it's that person that says, yes, but his cholesterol is 6 and nothing happened to him. Yes, his cholesterol is 6, but he probably had the big fluffy molecules with a low ApoB. That's why you do get people that can go through life without incidents with normal or with high cholesterol levels, because the cholesterol level doesn't mean anything. You need to know the particle numbers.
Yeah. And we look at that value and we aim for around 0.75. So in South African terms, which is the lower the better. But I mean, at the moment, with our testing in our country, it only flags abnormal above 1.2,
1.2.
but it needs to be lower.
Yeah. Yeah, so we definitely, but that's where we also look at the other risk factors to decide if we want to go below 0.6 or if we're happy to keep it between 0.6, 0.8. So we use other factors to decide that.
And while you say that, I think that's the other nice thing about the web app, is the web app has got the calculations built in the background. So you put in the values, but you put in what you look like, what your biochemistry look like, what you can and cannot do with fitness tests and all that type of thing, and then also your biometrics of your in-body, and that puts the calculation together for you and say, okay, I understand your ApoB might be normal, but your whole cardiovascular risk is actually higher than normal for your age and gender. So that is one of the nice things. So you can see the slider. Is it red? Is it orange? Is it green? Is it yellow? So where do I stand for my peers or against my peers?
And people just respond better to color than a value.
Because we know the value. I mean, for me, 5 to 10 years ago, before we dug so deeply in it, you just wanted to know that your slider was in the green. That's what you wanted to know. Because, I mean, to be fair, 7 years ago, I did not know ApoB.
Yeah.
But we've schooled ourselves that much that these values now is daily talk for us, which is nice. So
Okay.
maybe that brings us to the next thing, which was also a surprise. That is very rarely tested in current literature, and even not, or in literature it is, but not in practice. Not only in South Africa. One of my friends sent me his values from a Harley Street doctor in the UK, and there was no lipoprotein A done. So, and that's a genetic risk factor that at the moment you should know about. It can't be controlled yet for us in South Africa, but there is treatment on the way.
Yes, absolutely. Lipoprotein little a, very rarely tested, though 1 in 5 people might have it. And it definitely increased the risk for cardiovascular incident. It's basically on the lipoprotein where the ApoB sits. There's like a little extra chain, if we can put it that way, that makes the molecule just a little bit more sticky. In layman's terms, it makes the molecule easier for the lipoprotein then to enter the artery wall and cause plaque formation. It's easier to clot up. So you've also got an increased risk for DVTs or deep vein thrombosis and things like that. Why do we need to know the value? Because if your value is raised, then we need to be much more aggressive in our cardiac management. So then we'll aim for an ApoB of, depending on your value of your lipoprotein little a, we'll probably go to below 0.6 for the ApoB.
And again, I think that's what that calculations in the background does for us. It brings that in. So you don't have to think, is it a problem? Is it not? We will say, yes, it is a problem. So let's do something about it, or let's get more info. But some of these things we can let slide. But if there's something that flags up, we need to get more information, because, I mean, the risk profiles we build through the app, but they are well researched. So, and I think the one thing we do is we don't say your cholesterol is high, here's a script. For statins, what we do is your ApoB is high, your lipoprotein is high, this is your risk, and these are your treatment options. Or if you do not want treatment options, these are the tests we want for more info. So.
Absolutely, and it's lipoprotein little a. It's one of those tests where we change the risks scale basically. So if you borderline risk, that's going to put you in the intermediate risk, or if you're low risk, that might take you to the borderline risk. So we up the risk level one step, and then if you up the risk level, that changes your management. So you're either going to be more aggressive with your ApoB value, or you're going to do the CAC scan, the
coronary
coronary
artery
artery
calcium scan. Yeah,
scan, um,
exactly.
which you might have neglected doing that test because you didn't know the lipoprotein little a.
Yeah.
So that helps us a lot in decision making on how to manage lipids.
Yeah, and I think people think like we do these tests and nothing happens. So we've had two of these clients that we did the tests, we gave the information, and nothing was done. And that turned really south. I mean, we have got info now that things do go wrong if you don't do anything about this. And that's what I mean, these things that we talk about, if you don't do anything, I mean, just take yourself for example. If you knew what we know now, you would have wanted to be treated at 25 already.
Oh, absolutely.
But we've seen people at 42 not do much and then end up with big surgery with their hearts. So we need to stress that these risks are real.
No, absolutely. And on that point, we've also had clients which had normal stress ECGs that turned out to have very bad results on the CAC scan.
Yeah.
So a normal stress ECG, in my opinion, doesn't mean anything. If you've got a positive stress ECG, yes, that's predictive. That
Yeah.
it does help us. But a negative stress ECG doesn't tell me zits about your cardiac health.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things. You get a lot of people coming in, oh, but I had a normal stress ECG. Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't help me much.
Exactly. I think the next test that we want to talk about is CRP.
Yes.
So there are two CRPs. So C-reactive protein pretty much shows inflammation. So there's a normal CRP, and then there's a high sensitivity CRP. And again, there's nice evidence now that a raised high sensitivity CRP is a good predictor for cardiac disease in the future. So that is something we test and add into our calculations. So
so the CRP is like fuel on the fire. It adds into the risk and increases the risk quite a bit.
Yeah. And things that raise it is type 2 diabetes, gout, all that other little things in the background, high blood pressure. It just tells us the inside is unhappy. And for our layman, that's pretty much what I'm aiming at is if the inflammatory markers are up on the inside or raised, then the inside system is unhappy.
Now, sometimes it takes a little bit of digging to get to the actual point of what's rising, why you have a raised CRP, but it's a red flag for us, definitely.
Absolutely. Okay, I want to move on, but I am going to push my iron in here. I love iron, and I love. We've had 2 podcasts about iron, and while you were talking about cholesterol and how it should get around in the body, iron is the same. It can't just be transported inside the body without being made soluble, and it's been made soluble with a lasso of protein, which is then how we test actually is ferritin. So, which is pretty much our stores. So I think, I mean, as I said earlier, it is amazing that we started learning about iron pretty much in 2017, 18. And now, I mean, just before we got here, I saw someone that's just seen their doctor had had an iron profile with a clear iron deficiency, but it was not recognized because of a CRP that was high. So interesting that the tests are still so badly interpreted.
I think there's a lot of movement at the moment. I think people like Prof. Vernon Lowe is doing a lot for the whole medical sphere in the sense of iron awareness. I think also the thinking of, initially we said earlier last year, the beginning of 2025, some labs still use 20 as a cutoff value. It should be around about 30, but we're thinking now 50, 80 is at least the lowest level, and it's moving the needle, and it's all based on studies that's been done, compared to bone marrow storage and things like that to blood values. So the thinking now is that you need a much higher ferritin than what the lab value states at the moment. And unfortunately, in a busy practice, you look at the levels, sometimes some doctors don't, you don't even look at the actual value, you just see if it's flagged red or not. And that's how a lot of these things are missed. Iron deficiency is so common that we've got you from your emergency medical background, myself with my anesthetic background, we've opened an iron infusion clinic at our clinic, and do iron infusions on referral based from our colleagues. And it's just amazing how many people are low on iron.
Yeah. So I think I'm not going to delve too much into it, but I want to say to the people out there, if you've got, just go and research. There's a long list of iron deficiency, but headaches, hair loss, brittle nails, anxiety, chest pains, brain fog, ADHD in kids. I mean, the thinking now is that if your child is iron deficient, and proven iron deficient, then you could turn around the ADHD symptoms in about a quarter of them if they have a tested low iron. The problem is not a lot of kids get taken for the little blood test, and then you don't know. But it is so common, and I mean, even in my own house, both my kids were low. I mean,
but even also, I think the important fact, and we mentioned it in the podcast with iron deficiency in the athlete, is that often people go to their GP when they're unwell, and then they get their ferritin levels done at that point. But the ferritin is also a reactive protein, so it will go up when you're unwell. And then you get the ferritin level back and it's in the normal range, and you miss an iron deficiency completely.
Absolutely. And I think that was where I was headed. If you get your bloods done, at least the CRP, ferritin, and an HB, it costs you less than 200 Rand in South Africa. Get the test done, and then almost like the test that we said earlier, a normal or a high ferritin you cannot trust unless you've got a CRP, but a low ferritin you can absolutely trust. I'm probably going to leave it there because I'll go on a tangent about iron, but really I think it's something, it's one of those values you just need to know.
Yeah, and men probably once a year, females I think twice a year ferritin level, to be honest.
Absolutely. Good. Okay, so let's move a little bit. So now we've done cholesterol and that part. So now we're going to think glucose. So another one of our, it's actually quite pertinent that we talk about the glucose because the food pyramid has changed around in December. The American Dietary Association have now said, okay, but carbohydrates should not be the base of your pyramid, which is probably a good thing as far as type 2 diabetes goes. But that's also been quite a surprise how many people not have a high glucose level, but physiologically the step before that is a high fasting insulin.
Yes. And we pick that up quite often.
Very often.
So basically, if you think of diabetes, it's probably like a linear process where your insulin will slowly rise before your glucose starts to rise, before you get to pre-diabetes, before you develop diabetes. And it's also a process that happens over time. But the nice thing with this is a reversible condition if you manage it correctly in the early stages. So basically, we store our glucose in our muscles in the form of glycogen. So there's a little receptor on the muscle cell. So 60 to 70% of the glucose is stored in our muscles. And the insulin binds to the receptor, and that lets the glucose into the muscle cell so it can be stored. So over time, your ability to store the glucose in the muscle is decreased, basically. And then your body starts to push out more insulin to keep the blood glucose level lower. So your blood glucose will still be low, but slowly your insulin will start to rise. And that's the point where we want to pick it up. We do not want to pick it up at the point where the blood glucose is already high. And that's an excellent point to intervene with normal lifestyle interventions.
And as bad as it sounds, it's an overfeeding problem. I mean, it means we're getting too much carbs or
Yes,
too little exercise.
absolutely. And under muscle,
Yeah.
because your muscles is the store. But I think what people also need to realize is that there's a genetic component to this, is because everyone has got their own threshold of how many carbs you can tolerate in a certain sense. And we can see it in action in the lipid profile as well, in your triglycerides, and we can see it in your insulin levels. But you might not eat a lot according to yourself, but it might be too much for your body. Your body might not have the ability to deal with that load. So you need to look at your blood results to know, because we can probably, if we eat exactly the same amount of carbohydrates, we will have a different response on the blood level.
Yeah. And that brings our testing of our in-body scan. So that gives you a kind of a basal metabolic rate. So how much your algorithm says you can probably have on muscle mass, and then also on not bone density, bone mass, and where you should be aiming. So that is a value where you should be aiming. But fasting insulin, so if you think about taking in carbohydrates, insulin moves, and then the next step after that is only that your blood glucose will rise. So I think just coming back is a finger prick of a blood glucose tells you very little. If you find glucose in your urine, it's very late, because then you're already at a level of a glucose above 11. So then you are a type 2 diabetic. We want to catch you before any of that moves, is with the fasting insulin.
But the good news is that channel or receptor where the insulin binds to open the channel for the glucose to go into the muscle cell, you can bypass that through muscle contraction and exercise. So that's why if we exercise in certain ways, that we get such a good results with over time, obviously. And we talk about the 18 months period again. It's not like overnight, but we can do a lot to reverse that.
Yeah, and maybe while we talk about it, I mean, that is actually what we've seen is the one tablet that you should take is exercise. That is our best thing. So we always joke about it. People don't want to get off the couch and go walk around the block. They actually want to try and take a tablet to fix things. But by far the best medicine out of everything for what we test is exercise. And hence it's such a big part of our testing and our report is exercise. Yeah.
Yes, and we can maybe touch on step count and VO2 max at this point, because I think something like a step count is it doesn't cost much. You need a tracker to track your steps daily. And now just July last year, they published again on that, where they've taken many studies and put it all together and looked at health outcomes with step counts. And if you compare 2,000 steps a day, which is basically not much or something, that's the unfit category, and you can increase their step count to about 7,000 steps a day, it's either 43 or 47% decrease in all-cause mortality, going from 2,000 steps a day to 7,000 steps a day. So if you want to do something and increase your likelihood of all-cause mortality to go down by 43%, just increase your step count from 2,000 to 7,000. The problem is, do you know how many steps you take a day? You need to measure it. You need to actually monitor it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't cost much to get more steps in.
And again, I think exercise is one of the things that we can go down the rabbit hole. But I want to stick with it, with our glucose. So we obviously do. We hope we can catch you in the fasting insulin level being high if you struggle. But if that is already a problem, there are two other tests that we do further down the line. So we do a fasting glucose test, and we do a HbA1c.
Yes. So the HbA1c gives you an indication of the average glucose over the last 3 months, more or less. So it's a nice test. It sometimes can be influenced by iron deficiency and things like that. So you just need to be conscious about that. But at least you need to have that test. If you can't get the fasting insulin, we like the fasting insulin because the earlier we can catch the disease, the better. If we do get on the family history, someone that's got a history, quite a strong family history, we'll even do a glucose intolerance testing, which is another thing we can do to make sure that there's nothing going on. But at least the HbA1c is like the minimum that you need to have.
And we're trying to build the picture. I always say to people, the tests build a picture of how close you are to metabolic syndrome. So the metabolic syndrome is the name that's been given in the medical community for this add-on illnesses. So on their own, they might not be the biggest problem, but if you fit them together, they are like a flywheel. They make this thing go berserk with risk. So we've got type 2 diabetes, we've now talked about cholesterol, and then there's the blood pressure.
Yes.
Which has also been something that surprised us.
Absolutely. And I think that's close to me because, I mean, I'm taking a blood pressure tablet daily. And the funny thing is, I mean, we in the world of longevity and preventative medicine, and I've been on borderline for a while, not just slightly, just on the line. I've done all the lifestyle interventions, but it was still on the line. And there was some resistance in myself taking another tablet. But obviously I got over that, started taking the medications, and I've got my Hyla band monitoring the blood pressure and everything. And at the end of the day, it's a non-event. And blood pressure is perfectly normal now. If you go look at the studies, it's shown that a systolic blood pressure between 120 and 124 just got much, much better health outcomes than any blood pressure above that. We as medical doctors tend to overlook blood pressure. We often tell people, oh, it's not too high, go exercise a little bit, change your diet. We should be much more aggressive on treating blood pressure. I think that's one of the big learnings from last year for myself. Even being a doctor in the field, still reluctant to treat my own blood pressure. It should not be like that.
But I also think, Shaun, the nice thing is we are both in this world, and as we proclaim in what we do here, we test ourselves, and you've tested different types of medication, and you found that one works better than the other. Once a day of this one is better than twice a day of that one. So, I mean, and that's the things. What we've built in here is this: when you get your action list, that's going to be, your action is going to be test your blood pressure at home, that we get a value, or no, it's that high that we start treatment and then we're treating at home, but we will not let it go. It's like your ApoB. If it's high, even though you've got a normal CAC scan, we won't let it go. We will test it again. You cannot let these things just slide.
And it's going to be yellow, orange, or red. You can't ignore it.
Yeah.
If it's above the values that it should be, then I know the new guidelines state quite low values. And people are always like, what? That can't be. But the reality is, it's a linear progression. After systolic of 124, your risk goes up.
Yeah. And then, I mean, we do get people with 138s that say, no, it's been like that forever and I'm okay. No, it's not okay. You have to get enough values behind what we're doing, and then you have to treat.
And I think you've just said it now. It's been like that forever. That's exactly the problem. It's the time under the curve, the time that you've been exposed to an abnormal something, an abnormal lipoprotein, ApoB, an abnormal blood pressure. The longer you've been exposed to that, the higher the risk of it actually becoming a problem later in life. So there's a time factor behind it. And that's why hypertension is called the silent disease or the silent killer, because you don't really know you've got blood pressure. You don't really feel bad unless it's so high that you've got headaches and things like that, or nosebleed. But I mean, then that's, you've missed the boat by far.
Yeah.
So no, we need to intervene much earlier. And a borderline, the study shows, a borderline high blood pressure is a problem.
We need to test it. We need to test and act. That's the other side. Sometimes you test and you're like, no, you'll be okay. No. And that's the nice thing about getting that data in front of you, is it's going to show red. We do something.
Yeah, and on the web app, it's going to ask you to do an action. What's your action? You need to think about it. So you need to, on the app, we as physicians now need to put an action in. Either repeat the test or start the treatment or do home monitoring, but you need to do an action if it's abnormal.
Absolutely. Good. If we then talk about dementia, the brain, we want a little bit of values there. So we need a homocysteine level. So homocysteine level is also something we find there's no way we can see it from outside in people. Some people that you think should have completely normal levels surprise you, and they've got raised levels. And then you dig in and you find that they're not putting the pieces of the puzzle together to have it low. So
yeah. So homocysteine is a breakdown product from methionine. And your body recycles it through methylation, and it mostly uses B vitamins to do that. So if you've got a problem in B vitamins, specifically B12, B1, B6, and folic acid, then that process of clearing it up is a bit of a problem, and then you'll have this raised product called homocysteine, which is not good for your blood vessel health, if we can put it that way. But it's an easy fix. Some people, I mean, it can be raised if you drink too much alcohol, if you smoke. And then I think it's about 30% of people that might have that genetic variation that just needs more B vitamins to actually do the job. So we usually start them on B vitamin treatment. And in most of the cases, that's all you need to do.
Yeah. And again, we're not punting loads of vitamins. We're just saying you do need the B vitamins. If you get it through your food enough, then that's okay. But most people need a little bit of a top up. I mean, if it's intravenous or however you do it, and then obviously the omega-3s, that's the other part of that puzzle. So yeah, and most of our diets are a little bit deficient in omega-3s. So my normal advice to people would be like, how many times a week do you eat fish? And if they eat it less than twice a week, then it's not enough. You need at least some of that fatty acid.
Yeah, so we can actually test the red blood cell omega-3 index, but it's an expensive test in South Africa. We don't do it as a first-line treatment or investigation. So we work on the questionnaire and just getting some information there. And they said sometimes we'll punt it a little bit if there's inflammation in the body or there's dementia in the family or like just a lack in the diet, which makes a difference.
Yeah. So just going through our list, what we've talked about blood pressure and we've talked about ferritin. I think I maybe want to come back to the fitness part. So we do a extrapolated VO2 max in our testing, and then if there is a little bit of unsurety or if we are unsure about that, then we ask for formal tests. So Hannes, the biokineticist, do a formal test. But by far, again, out of all this, the proxy of VO2 max for how good your health is probably the one that ticks the most amount of boxes.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things. It's a nice metric. It's measurable in a lab. It's nice for study. So there's many studies done on VO2 max and health outcomes. And as with the step count, it shows if you, from the lower tier of an unfit person to the top tier of a very fit person, there's a 5-fold increase in all-cause mortality going down to the unfit person. So it encapsulates the whole process of how you generate energy from taking in the oxygen, producing energy. It shows the effort that you've put in actually being fit.
Yeah. So it is actually a proxy for that you're doing everything else right in what we've been testing, but it doesn't give us all the values. So, but it is a nice metric to have, and it will be in your in your report on the web app. And then we also test strength. So, and we do that with a few of the bigger muscles that we test. So
Yeah, so we do the grip strength and squat test and push-up test. But like VO2 max, that gives us an indication of how much muscle mass you have. So as we age, we do lose muscle mass. And most of the cases when we start to develop insulin resistance as we age is because we're not over fat, but we're under muscle. Okay,
Yeah.
because we said earlier that muscle is a sump for the glucose. That's where we store the glucose. It's what we use to burn energy. It's a metabolic active tissue. So we do the in-body scan to determine, if you're under muscled or not. But through the testing as well, we can put that together and see where we can improve. Because if you improve on your muscle strength and muscle mass, then all the other metrics start to fall in place. So
Yeah.
we don't like a weight. We don't want to know how much you weigh. We want to actually know your percentage of body fat, your visceral fat especially, what's the number there,
Yeah.
and then your lean muscle mass.
Yeah, hence, I mean, in the beginning, we used to do the BMI only, and we certainly agree that BMI is a measure, but it's very crude. So that's why we got the in-body scan that now gives us the value almost as good as a DEXA scan. It's not a complete DEXA scan, but it gives us a very good, or a few very good pointers about what it sees on the inside through impedance.
And I think on this, one of the things that, through the year that we've noticed, especially with Monjaro, I mean, you notice what an effect that has on, how good it works actually. All our clients will get an in-body scan, so we can measure the muscle mass. We can track it over time, make sure that we keep that muscle mass or even increase that muscle mass for people that might need something like Monjaro.
Yeah, so just to bring back, so the Manjaro is the GIP, GLP-1. We do use it a lot because it makes a lot of these metrics better, but we do it with thorough testing. And a lot of people ask about losing muscle. We haven't seen that as much as in the literature because we actually say, but you cannot stop heavyweight stuff. You need to pick up heavy stuff to keep muscle. You cannot just sit on the couch and diet and think you're going to keep your muscle.
I think we agree on the fact that if you're not going to do your part, we won't prescribe it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's almost the same in the same breath. A lot of guys that test low in testosterone, our first question is, but do you pick up heavy stuff? Because you will lose testosterone if you sit on the couch and play games. But if you pick up heavy stuff, your testosterone should increase. And if it is then low, yes, we will help. But there is a point in your life that you will dip, but you still need to do the lifestyle interventions.
So to come back to the start again, so we said you need a roadmap, and that's why you need someone to help you through this, okay, to see what is important. Everyone is different. Okay, so once you've done the testing and had a good look, we can decide. You might be metabolic inclined to need some more more help on the metabolic side. You might need more help on the cardiovascular side. You might just need more help with the exercise side or body composition. Everyone differs. So it's important to then have a personalized roadmap to what your health journey looks like. And that's where we want to go. So it's difficult to say, okay, what do you need to test? I need to test 2 or 3 things. It depends.
Yeah, and I think what you said there is you, the client, need a roadmap, not your doctor. Your doctor doesn't need a roadmap for you. He's going to see you for a short time, maybe once or 2 or 3 times a year when you're sick. So you need a roadmap for your health, but you need it in your pocket. So log into your website, see where you are, and that's you. And you can act. When you see the dietitian, if you maybe see a dietitian or your biokineticist, they can change stuff send us stuff to change in your profile, and that you can see your stuff change or your values change in real time. I think that's the one thing. You need a roadmap. And I think the other part is there's been very much asymmetric information, meaning your doctor knows a lot and you don't about your these values. And that's why we're sitting here. For us, we want to educate and say, but these are the values we think you need to know to get to a good 80. So, and when you come to us, we will refer and say, but go and look at podcast number 56, or I mean for 6 or 5 or 6. That's where we talk about that, because that is literally what we preach. Is we practice what we preach. And I think the people need to know we've developed this web app to give people their roadmap in their hand.
Absolutely. And take control of their own health. In South Africa, often your results lie in some other cupboard somewhere in the GP's office, and then your special test at the specialist is in another cupboard at another place. Now we just put it all together so that you have all your data with you, you in control of your data. You can open it up in any country that you're at that point, Spain, Portugal, USA, wherever you are, and you need to get access to your information, you've got it at hand, which is nice, because sometimes things happen and you get admitted to a hospital, another place. You can just open the app and say, here's all my information available. That's what the guys have done. This is what I look like. And having it with you make you conscious about the fact that you need to do stuff. And you can monitor yourself and you can take control of your own health.
Yeah, and we will keep building to try and bring APIs in there to bring information. So we'll keep building them, but I think it's a really good building block to start off with. And I think what we've seen now, what we would love to see our clients the first time at 35, just to screen that guys that or girls that need help at 35 and not at 45. Most people start feeling oldness or something changing in their body at around 45. And that's 44 to 47 has been our contact time when we see people when they start feeling, but they now need to know something about their health. But if we can catch them even just before 40, that is golden time. And hopefully we will get to the point that people realize, but we see enough of this that we're changing lives in this 35 to 45 time.
But it's never too late. I mean, I'm like 52 in a couple of days and I feel better than at 35. So there's hope.
No, absolutely. And I think coming back to what I said is we now have moved so far from not just patching up disease that we're actually getting to people coming sitting in front of us. But we found someone on this weekend that rode a mountain bike, and I saw them change, and I asked them, what did you do? And they say, go and see these guys. And that is amazing.
Perfect. So let's hope people keep their New Year resolutions.
So maybe go and find us on innersight.co.za, have a bit of a read, listen to our podcast, the previous ones. And I mean, if there are questions, pop something on Facebook, or we are here to educate, and I think that's the reason why we're sitting here on a January. Bring it back so people don't have all this high names, and we wanted to say that this is how you break it down, and there's a place to start.
Awesome.
Great. Let's have a good 2026. There we go.
Thanks, Rudy.
Cheers.
Disclaimer. This podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of your healthcare provider. No doctor-patient relationship has been formed through this podcast. The content here is for information purposes only.